Welcome back to another episode of Ocean Insight, the podcast series brought to you by the MeerWissen initiative, which supports African and German marine research institutions through a dedicated funding program. Your hosts are Paul Tudor and myself, Hauke Kegler. Unfortunately, Paul couldn't be with us this time, so I'm going on a solo dive today. My interview partners today are Birgit Quack and Florian Weinberger from the GEOMAR Helmholtz-Centre for Ocean Research Kiel, Waly Ndiaye from the Senegalese Institut for Agricultural Research in Dakar, who is actually just visiting his project partners in Kiel, and last but not least, Anna Fricke from the Leibniz Institute of Vegetable and Ornamental Crops. Today we are talking about one of the hidden champions of coastal marine ecosystems, seagrasses, or as they are often undeservingly called, seaweeds. And with my interview partners today, I will try to find out what special role they play for the Senegalese coastal ecosystems and the local communities and economy. Yeah, let's get started with setting the stage a bit. So if we talk about weeds in general in Europe, it's more about something annoying in our gardens. If you move further to the Netherlands, it might be something for recreational uses. But I assume that seaweeds are somewhat different. What role do they play for the environment?
Now, I was wondering about the word seaweeds, and you were asking about weeds in the European gardens, because when we were formulating the project, we were really discussing all the time if we want to call the macroalgae or if we call them seaweeds, and because seaweeds may have a bad meaning for people also when you have them washed up on the beaches, like Waly just referred to, as it happens in Senegal. And but macroalgae are more attached, for my feeling, to the ground, and you find that they have a lot of beneficial uses for the environment and for also humans.
I can add something if you want. So Waly has been talking a bit about the awareness of people in Senegal about seaweed, and he said that there's not much tradition in using them, but another role of seaweeds is, of course, that they have an ecological role, which is quite important. In shallow coastal waters, they are forming kind of submarine forests in all those locations where you have hard substrate. They cannot attach to sand or mud, but where you have hard substrate like rock, bedrock or stones or even gravel, you usually find seaweeds, and they have an important ecological role in these shallow coasts because they are providing shelter to a lot of associated organisms like animals and including, for example, fish. And they are also an important component of food web. So there are lots of animals that feed on them or that feed on organisms that feed on them. And for this reason, seaweed habitats are quite important. They are also actually important because they bind a relevant component of carbon. When you look at it globally, it has been estimated that about 2% of the carbon that is fixed by photosynthesis globally is actually fixed by seaweeds.
Okay, so they are also some sort of hidden champion in coastal ecosystems, given all the range of services they can provide in direct use or indirect use. You said already that by the local communities, they are sometimes also not considered that useful, if I can term that correctly. Besides offering all those services probably for, as fish nurseries, for example, that are then later beneficial to local fishers, is seaweed farming itself a primary activity for those local communities, or is it a local economic value that exists?
The use of seaweed in Senegal are mainly by just some collection, some exploitation, not some. They don't rear seaweeds. They don't cultivate them. The problem for fishermen is when they go to the sea and try to catch some fish, they have a lot of seaweed in their nets and they cause them some trouble. They don't use it, they try to eliminate it on the net and put it on the beach. And that's caused a lot of dirty image for this beach.
Okay, so they're probably then not aware how useful the seaweed itself is for their activities and how necessary it is to rear the fish stocks and provide the young fish and protect them. Do you know if the seaweed that is harvested, is it locally processed, or is the only thing that they harvesting at the moment exported?
For seaweed farming, there is some initiative that ANA, the national agency in Senegal, try to build, but this program doesn't succeed because they don't have a good experiences on seaweed farming, and the materials they buy are not quite efficient for cultivating them. And now, when we try to involve them in the project, they give us all the experiences they have, where site is good, where material is not recommended, and something like that. And according to that, we can base on our on these experiences to do something on seaweed cultivation. And just to add something after Anna, yes, the most treatment they do after they collect seaweed is just to transformation, like putting them in the sun and export them. There is some producer who collect the seaweed and export them, but in some area like Ngaparu, you can find chemist guys who collect seaweed and make some industrial extraction.
Thanks for sharing that, and we'll get to the local knowledge later on. But also now, if we want to dive in a bit more into the project itself, what's known about the status of seaweed ecosystems in Senegal? Because if you want to use something sustainably, you have to know how much you can take out, basically, before you have permanent damage.
I could start.
Okay, yeah, sure.
Okay, because when the project was formed, at first we were thinking, being of seaweed novelists in Senegal, there was really nothing known about seaweed in Senegal, because most publications which have been recently indeed published on seaweeds in Senegal are in African journals, which are hard to find. And then after we digged a little more into the literature, we found that since the 1920s, indeed, occasionally, especially French researchers have been in Senegal trying to look at the biodiversity. And at the end of the 90s, indeed, they started to also look at some ingredients of some of the seaweeds that are very prominent. And one of these is the Myristotheca senegalensis, which also has been, as Waly already said, been exported, dried to Japan. But there is more diversity, and a lot of the diversity has not been exploited. And now this project really tries to bring together the knowledge that is there with the new systematic approach. What is the status now, and what can we do with this? And
yeah, maybe we can start off with how to harness this local knowledge in terms of identification, for example, and how to harmonize it with newer technologies that I think you also want to apply for the region. And we were talking about genetic identification, for example. Let's start with that.
Yeah, perhaps I could address this identification problem that you have mentioned. So the general problem with identification of seaweeds or macroalgae is that they exhibit very few traits that allow to distinguish them. So it's very easy to confuse them because altogether they are organized in a relatively simple way and they are also variable. So there are many species that are not easy to identify, but easy to be confused. And traditionally, the identification of seaweeds, of course, started in Europe already with Carl von Linné, who tried to do this in the Baltic Sea, and then went on. And because Senegal was a French colony, the first scientists who worked there actually came from France, and they used the French literature, and they found often species there that looked like what they knew from France. And then they said, okay, this will be the same, which was, of course, in most cases not true because the climate in Senegal is completely different and the vegetation as well, also in the sea. So we are now still in a situation where we have picture of the species inventory of seaweeds in Senegal that is not complete. I mean, it is nowadays already much better than it was in the past because Senegalese researchers are working on this already for some decades. But as I said, it is not easy to distinguish species only based on morphology. And the solution then could be to DNA barcode them, to sequence selected parts of their DNA that can be indicative of their species, because each species has a particular sequence that can be used like a barcode. So one aspect of our project is to provide this for seaweeds in Senegal.
Okay, very interesting. So your plan is to have a new inventory of Senegalese seaweed species, or correct maybe some mistakes that were made when the French came and did the first identifications based on their knowledge. Quite interesting. Yeah, nice. You also talked about the hesitancy of local communities to use seaweeds as an economic factor when it comes to making income. Is one plan of the project also to change that? So are you planning on creating ideas or building a mindset around seaweeds as a sustainable source of income, for example?
Yes, we plan to share them some experiences about the use of seaweed, like what we can see in Zanzibar, some coast where they grow, they cultivate seaweed, and they use it for some product, and to share them all the use we can have on seaweed. Some local community are not very. We don't have the cultural thing for eating the seaweed, something like that. But you see, in many cases, in some case, in some area where they try to integrate seaweed in the bread, something like that, in order to give it some additional value of this product. And we have to share all these experiences to the local community in order to engage them to the.
So the project has been running now for, I think, 1.5 years, if I'm correct, almost. Are there any first stories you can tell us about your endeavors in changing the seafood market and the identification process?
Just thinking about it, I think when we started the project, Corona was starting. So we had to change a lot of our timing, not the general plan, and also some. So for instance, Florian and me, we definitely wanted to go from Kiel to Senegal. And also I had the idea to bring some food from seaweed that is provided here in Germany by Asian countries. But obviously this has not taken place. And the success story definitely is that Waly and his team have been twice out in the field and the entire Senegalese coast, which was a very hard endeavor, and get the samples and talk to the local community. And there are definitely some nice stories in that fieldwork. I think for the audience, it may also be nice to know that CLIMALG SN has a Twitter channel and an Instagram channel, and you find some of the photos from the field missions and with the curious kids on these channels. And
I'm sure everybody will be happy to join. Instagram is something that I haven't heard of yet by all the other projects. So it's nice to have a good visualization of what's going on in the field.
We're a little bit behind with the summer field mission, but still it's increasing.
COVID has bound all of us to our desks for the better part of 2 years now. And I mean, I see Waly in Kiel, and you were able to go out and collect samples. So I think that's a great success already, having a workshop with partners on site. So I think that's something you can be really proud of in those time and the short time that we are given in the project itself.
We are also happy that we've been given an extension to September 22 within the MeerWissen project, which I think will bring our possibility to reach the goals of the project much more to reality. So I think the goals are the same, the time is a little bit longer, so we are very much looking forward to being able to fulfill our goal, which will be the end. I think it's a policy brief to the local government to tell them what the seaweed in their coasts have as opportunities. So what?
Nice. I was just about to ask what impacts you think you want to have in the end of your project. So what your end goals are. Can you share already a bit of those policy recommendations that you want to include in the brief? So do you have any interim results yet?
So my personal feeling, but I have not been in Senegal, is that the local knowledge which is already there. There are several teams in Senegal which appear to work on seaweed or which appear to have worked on seaweed. And I think there should be an institution or something or a person who really tries to bring this knowledge together. So this would be one of my personal first outcome. But I guess Waly and Florian may see it from the different side, because it's really hard to get information which is already there for the project, because I think everybody is proud of their own data. And so you will not share it very freely. And it's hard to trace knowledge back from research or from other institutions. But maybe Waly now has a better experience being there and talk to the people. What would you think?
Yes, it is. Yes, very difficult to get some data from something like university or something like the seabed directorate, because they collect some data, but they don't want to share it freely. And when you try to involve them in the project, they ask you why you don't work with them when we draft the project. And sometimes it's very stuck to work with them. But now we try to be quite very diplomatic in order to share what we have and engage them to share what they have. And after all the discussion, we can be able to define some technical note according their data and our data in order to share them to the policy maker, in order when we talk about Meristoteca, we know where we can find a lot of biodiversity of Meristoteca, and what is approximately the quantity we can collect in order to sustainably use the biomass we have here, and it is something very interesting to know for the authorities.
It's also very hard to combine scientific knowledge and stakeholder knowledge, and I think when you start for a deadline to propose a proposal, you definitely are very happy to have some stakeholders in your project, but you will not be able to find them all. As Waly just said, it was, some people complained that they may have not been integrated. So this process would be good to have a separate or an additional room for first creating the stakeholder database before you really have to go into the deep science. But this is a very long time and not possible in a really very well possible in 2 years project.
Definitely for sure. And I think this has been echoing through all the interviews we had on this, on Ocean Insight, all the talks we had with the other projects. It was always an issue of breaking down those silos where data was created independently and not shared. And I think policymaking is such a messy process in the end that you cannot time for it in the beginning. You cannot say we will have a nice policy by the end of 2 years. And I think, now MeerWissen, the third call is open, and it's with a dedicated co-design phase where you can spend time on including stakeholders from the very beginning. So I think also maybe we all provided valuable lessons to the design of the next call.
Just from my side, I think what I can see positive is what I've seen over the project time is that there's a lot of interest on the topic, and this project is kind of a seeded out, and now it's growing because the interest coming, and people are attracted that are working in this field and were maybe shy or is not really aware that there's something going on. And now they're showing that they are there, that they have done something. And that is also positive because, of course, they may potentially getting their claims, but they're showing that there is something already done, there's something up to. And I think that is also a very important thing, that is a starter to bring something in move.
And they seem to be interested in your work, and they seem to be, not... the problem seems to be that they were not included from the beginning because you didn't know. So it's a nice way to go ahead. I think the policy brief is a perfect opportunity. So I think you're right on track. And also the idea of creating a focal point for seaweed knowledge in Senegal or in the region is, I think, a great approach that will be taken up later. So far from the policy side, I think, Florian, you have a bit of a different perspective when it comes to the genetic work.
Another component of this project is actually to provide expertise to the Senegalese partners with respect to monitoring biodiversity in seaweed habitats. And this is actually why I'm in this project. So my main role is actually to provide this expertise, which I hope will be relevant in the end of the project, which is that we are going to provide expertise to the Senegalese partners with respect to monitoring biodiversity in coastal environments. And this is obviously important because, as I said before, this project is not only about using marine resources, but about using them in a sustainable way. So it is important to do this in such a way that allows us to not damage the environment by any measures that we take, right? And the question is then how can we monitor the effects of any interventions that are being done in a coastal environment, like transforming a seaweed bed into a seaweed farm or something like this. And one approach that is possible to do this is to monitor, of course, to monitor the diversity of organisms in the habitat in question before and after interventions. And in general, biodiversity is a quite efficient indicator of the importance of marine environments in ecological terms. The higher biodiversity, the higher the ecological importance, because it's a more important habitat if biodiversity is high, since it harbors more different organisms. So how can we monitor this biodiversity? There are different approaches for it, and most of them are very work intense because we have to go out and dive and check the presence of organisms that are there. So it's very time consuming, and more modern approaches try to do this again based on DNA sequencing. It is possible to collect the DNA that is in seawater and to sequence it, and then to derive from the sequences that we find in the seawater sample how many different organisms were present in this environment when we took the water sample. So this is something that is currently being developed in many different countries worldwide. And in our project, we aim to do the same thing for Senegal and to help the Senegalese team to get this under control, to be able to do it in Senegal with their habitats. And this is the main reason actually why Waly is currently in Kiel. He has bought the sample set that they collected there during the last months with him. And we are now working on these samples, and we are currently extracting DNA from them. Our goal is to then analyze DNA traces in all these samples, and this is meant as a kind of proof of concept that this also works in Senegal, and at the same time, Waly will know how to do this, how to conduct the methodology, so that he can then later on do this also in Dakar. So I think one important outcome of this project will be probably that we will be able to train Senegalese scientists in this respect, because Waly will be able to multiply the knowledge when he comes back to his country.
Yeah, excellent. And you're also involved with master students in Senegal, as far as I know. And you pointed out quite right that there's no use in having policies if you don't have the underlying data to base your decisions on in the end. So I think that's a crucial gap that you're also addressing in the project, because all management decisions will be useless in the end if you don't know what effect they are having on the environment. So yeah, thanks for pointing that out in the end. And I mean, it sounds like you're taking a very holistic approach, and you are trying to address in the short period of time many of the underlying issues that exist today in conservation and sustainable use of seaweed ecosystems, and maybe also trying to promote the economic perspective of that for the local communities. Are there any last, because I think I exhausted all my questions I had burning in me concerning this project. Are there any final remarks from your experiences that you have, or the next steps you want to take? A short round, maybe 1 or 2 sentences each.
I can definitely start. And I would very much hope that we can at least join the last final meeting, and which should be a big policy event next year in summer in Senegal. And I hope that everybody really can be there in person. And we can exchange our gains from the project freely, which definitely will then be easier for people to remember and follow up, together with the electronic resources that we provide.
Yeah, well, I can take over. I think from my side, it's it's a very interesting time also to have this kind of project. In a way, we are sitting far away from where the work is basically done, and have to do everything online and try to reach and communicate. But I'm positive surprised how well everything went. Even if you hear about the problems, the issues, and you're just sitting there and you can just talk about your experience and give advice and hope that everything will figure out. But so far, it's impressive how good things went. It was a great survey that was done, a lot of sample collected. There was a lot of people interactions, which was there and also online. I think from this side, I feel that the project already is a success in a way, even if we don't have like fixed data in hand because it's all in the process. But there's more about this project than just scientific studies, of course. And I think there is already some good footprints set.
For me, yes, I'm a little bit surprised by the evolution of the project. I think when we beginning the project, we just focus on seaweed, on macroalgae. But now when we progress, we see other topics that are linked to seaweed or something other, who are very interesting to move forward. And then we have a lot of joining partner that can provide us more skills about how to assess our environment, and it is something very promising to create the networks, the partnership in this area, and for next topic or next project.
I think on my side, I cannot really judge on the way in which Senegalese stakeholders are involved, because as I said before, I had no chance to be there. I have participated in some video meetings, but this is not really real life. So I think this is an aspect that is more in the hand of the Senegalese team. But what I have learned so far was that the methodology that we are developing together for monitoring of biodiversity could be very interesting in additional ways. I mean, when we launched the project, we said this would be about seaweeds and seaweed habitats and so on. But actually, Senegal is a country that has quite a few problems. I mean, there's an overfishing problem, and Waly already mentioned this. There's also this problem that there are toxic algal blooms that are causing diseases in in communities of fishermen. And so they are now trying to find out the causative agents of this disease. And all these questions could possibly be better handled if there would be more knowledge about biodiversity and about the effects of any measures against these problems or measures to solve these problems and their effect on the Senegalese environments as a whole. So I'm thinking that what we are currently trying to develop is something that could also be useful in this respect. So my expectation or my hope is that we will be able in the end to contribute not only to a sustainable use of seaweed habitats, but also to a more sustainable or more efficient management of coastal environments in Senegal.
So now you know everything about seaweeds, the hidden champions of the Senegalese coastal ecosystems. Season 1 of Ocean Insight is now coming to an end. But for the last episode we have something very special in mind. A Christmas special about ocean politics in Africa. With partners on site, we'll talk about ocean governance, science and development politics. So make sure to tune in one last time with us in 2021. And rest assured, Season 2 is already in the making.